Okay, so I didn't always want to be a pastoralist. I had a budding career as a bricklayer, you see there, and I was probably never really had much of a likelihood of becoming a pastoralist until my parents bought Willeen in 1990. So this is Willeen, and though I quite like the idea of station life. I'd always been in the district, in the Mercian district, but we sort of dabbed with the shark lake. Anyway, we moved on the station in 1990, but it probably goes so far as to say that I didn't always have pastoralism in mind. There were other things that I could, there were certain periods of my life where being a pastor was probably the last thing on my mind, but nonetheless, we moved on from there. It wasn't just because I didn't particularly like sheep. They're not really my favourite animal. You see these sheep, they've got a difficult choice here, a difficult decision to make. They can either get drowned from the rising floodwater here from the Willeen Lake, or walk through that ankle-deep water through the gate and survive. So, that's sort of encapsulates how I think about sheep. They're not sort of sure what they're going to do in that situation. I think they're probably an animal very well predisposed to dying as early as they possibly can, and they don't have much personality either. So, anyway, sheep not really my thing, but that wasn't the only reason that I didn't want to take Willeen on. We've also got a lot of this erosion here. So this is the top of the catchment up here, that little hill there. So we're nearly there, and in lots of places we are there. Like the erosion's gotten all the way back to the top of the catchment, and it's obviously draining the water out of the landscape. And we can also see we don't have much soil in the Mercian, quite a lot of places. In fact, this place, in this area here, we've probably got more than a lot of areas. This is a bit of a hard pan sneaking through there. So once we erode the landscape like this, it's not very useful for anything really. And we had a lot of that. And I studied environmental management for a little bit till they kicked me out. So I sort of understood some of these processes. Dust storms, used to have a lot of dust storms. That's a dust storm. My partner Francis said it just looked like a big rain coming, but it's not. There's dust there, there's clouds there as well, but that's mostly dust. We used to have a lot of dust storms, but don't tend to get a lot of them now, but we used to have a lot. And lack of diversity, obviously. This is some of our high carrying capacity country, supposedly. It's along the river here, and we've got this is a grindstone used by the Wadjuri people back in the day for crushing up grain. And in fact, there's hundreds of artefacts through this bit of country here, because it used to be productive. Obviously not very productive now. That's a woody weed, an increaser. So not even he's surviving there. So and that's also in the close to, not quite in, but close to the Mullawater grey stock route. So 350 I think was the maximum head of sheep went up and down that stock route every year. So it's pretty degraded. So yeah, same sort of thing here. We've got a lack of diversity. So this is further up in the landscape. This is not in the river. This is close to the watershed, obviously. The early explorers actually described there's a cave, which is in the next photo, but there's a cave just over there. That the early explorers went to, and they described grass up to the belly of their horses at this exact spot. So we've obviously lost a lot of diversity and productivity from the landscape. So yeah, this is that previous photo was taken from about here, looking that way at the other end of the rock. Anyway, I put this photo in just to show that when you do have a bit of rain, it's lovely country, and that's sort of a lot of the attraction, I think, for myself and other pastoralists, those sorts of things. It's when it does rain, it all looks fantastic, and you forget about the dry times. I don't really need the notes. I'm going to miss something, but anyway, it's all good. So yeah, I wasn't really interested in taking on the property until I met Hugh Pringle and Ken Tinley. This is actually I was looking through. I had to do this PowerPoint with my partner Francis, who's good at these sorts of things. She wasn't there, so I was trolling through trying to find pictures, and this is the only picture I could actually find of Hugh. That's Hugh there. But anyway. No doubt none of you met Hugh Pringle. You know what he looks like, so you won't have to. But he walked through our landscape with us, him and Ken Tinley, and spent quite a lot of time with us. And that made it gave me a very good understanding of how the landscape sort of functions. I knew there were problems with it, but you know, what was essentially driving those problems I didn't really understand until Ken and Hugh came along. I'm not sure if I want the next one yet or not. So they organised a trip to Woodgreen Station, which is just north of Alice Springs, and Bob Purvis owns that station, and so they organised a trip over there, and that was the first time I ever wanted to be a pastoralist, having a look at his property. Like, it was absolutely amazing. When we went there, some of his neighbours were, one of them was talking about shooting cattle. You know, none of his neighbours had any feed, and he had just grass, you know, all through, big fat whales of cattle. Like, it was just absolutely amazing, the difference that he'd made to that landscape over sort of 30 or 40 years. And he built a lot of these. This is a ponding bank. So the idea is that you build these on a bit of a little eroded stream, only a small one, and then it fixes the erosion. But for the most part, the purpose of them is to reintroduce grass to the landscape. And one of the big ones he used was buffel grass, well, mainly buffel grass, I think. It's his system, so I shouldn't talk too much about it. But nonetheless, he enthused us, I guess that's the point, to do something. So we bought this bulldozer over here, which was one he recommended. It's very old and cheap. And we started building these banks around the place. And, you know, I guess I learned a lot from that. And so this is us trying to get some grass established in the landscape. We're planting it by hand there and seeding it, you know, just trying to find out what, you know, this exercise is not really not designed to, you know, make grass grow all over the landscape. It's just to try and find out what grasses do grow in the landscape, and we're sort of taking them from other places and putting them here to try and figure out if we can get some grass to grow. And we did get the odd grass to grow. There's one there, but for the most part, they didn't grow because, you know, that grass there, that might be the only. We've got a lack of grasses in the southern ranges, in case you hadn't noticed. You know, those grasses there, they might be the only ones in the whole paddock. We're talking about a paddock that's, you know, 5 mile by 10 mile. So, you know, it didn't take the stock very long to find those, and not just the stock, the kangaroos and those sorts of things, and come in and wipe them out. So I'd have to say the banks that we built weren't terribly effective because. What's the next slide? Without the grass, the bank won't. The bank is there to grow the grass, and then the grass then protects the bank by slowing down the water. So we haven't. Admittedly, this is a terrible choice of photo. I don't know why I picked this one, but anyway, there is quite a lot of grass here. It's an annual grass though, so it's sort of grown up afterwards. But we didn't have the grass growing on the bank and around the edge like the perennial grass. So consequently, some of the banks failed, and this is not to illustrate that there's no grass, because there's heaps of grass in this picture. But it's to illustrate how the banks can fail, and if you build them in the wrong place, that's probably a better thing to illustrate for this picture. You know, we built a lot of the banks in the wrong place, and that's the thing. You can. It's very easy to actually build these banks in such a way and in such a place that they don't have the desired effect. So consequently, we sort of stopped building them for the most part. We started building these. These are what we call enviro rolls, because the money that we got to build the first ones was EnviroFund money, and they're a roll, so enviro rolls. Anyway, so it's what we call septic mesh. So it comes with a 60-metre roll, and we roll it out, and then we sort of bend the corner over. I've never really found a good way to describe that, but you can see it there. We sort of, you know, this edge here, this edge coming around here rolls along that edge, and then we keep wiring it together. And then we put those in quite high flow areas, like here. So this is also not a very good picture. We've got all this stuff in the front of it. It's not really to stop the debris that is coming down in the river at that point. It's more to slow this bit of the river down. The bit that's rushing very quickly in the middle, because rivers don't, I mean, you kind of think of them flowing flat. They don't really, they sort of flow in a bit of a V, and this stuff here is rushing away very quickly. So it's about trying to slow down that bit right in the centre of the river, and if the roll gets full of debris, well then that makes it difficult for the roll, because it's holding back too much water. So we kind of want to hold just enough water that we can slow it down enough to raise the level and spread it back out onto the floodplain. It's essentially, not describing this very well, I should have practiced. No, I haven't practiced. It's not essentially doing the work right there where you can see the roll. It's doing the work a kilometre away, because there's a kilometre away where the edge of the flood is. It's now probably getting, the water's a little bit higher. It only has to be a little bit higher on a flat floodplain. That means that it might be 500, 700 metres that is getting flooded now with the enviro that wouldn't have been getting flooded before. So it's not so much to combat what's actually happening right there. It's more about trying to get more of the water spread out much further out on the floodplain. So far, so good. So it was about this time, we were doing all these things, and it was about this time that they shipped me off to this place. This is, we had a big drought in sort of 2004, 2005, and we had a few sheep left, and Dad didn't want to adjust them, and because he couldn't really afford it, and we couldn't keep them on the property because there was no feed, so he bought a farm. Couldn't really afford that either. But anyway, I went over to the farm, and it didn't really have much on it. There was no house. That's the house over there. No garden around because it's just arrived. And anyway, I looked after the sheep at the farm. And one of the things that we did was we planted these perennial grasses here. So these are an introduced species. Tim was there, giving us all sorts of good advice. Must have been good because they grew. And we spent quite a lot of money trying to put these grasses in, these introduced grasses, perennial grasses. And I thought, why don't we do that at home? Like, why don't we spend the money at home trying to grow the grasses? Because there hadn't been much effort up until that point in trying to get the grasses growing at home. We've got this big floodplain there, we're supposed to have grass but doesn't have any, or has very little. I thought maybe we should concentrate our efforts not, 200 kilometres away on the coast. You can see the coast from that house, incidentally. That's by the by. But anyway, it was a long way away. I thought maybe we should be putting a little bit more effort into trying to recuperate the countryside at home. So I sat down and had a bit of a think about that for a while. And this next little bit wasn't going to be part of my talk, but we had the discussion about monitoring before with Kenshaw, and I was going to say something, but it wasn't really a question, and so I didn't know how I was going to get in there. I thought, I'll put it in my talk, and then no one will be able to tell me to shut up because my talk can do what I want. This is about the stage that we're going to the destocking. Now, talking about monitoring and recuperating the countryside. Like, I'm not. It's so complex. The landscape is so complex. It's so dynamic. It changes year to year, season to season, and I think a lot of people or a lot of government departments are trying to find the very fine line, trying to just be above the very fine line between sort of degradation and profitability. And I don't think that I'm good enough to pick where that line is. I don't know. And for different species and for different land systems and for different seasons, it's going to be different. Like, for this plant over here, you're fine. You're protecting that plant at this stocking rate or this whatever, this management technique. But for this one over here, you won't be. Like, you might be losing that one. And this one over here. So anyway, I didn't think that I could pick that line. So I decided that I would go way above the line. I would make sure that I was above the line. And that's where the destocking sort of came in. Like, I wanted to make sure that we were definitely getting as many runs on the board as we could. And every pastoralist wants to look after land because that's their business. But I'd grown up with a lot of pastoralists trying to put in infrastructure so that they could then manage their animals in such a way that they could let the country recover. I'd grown up with that, and it seems to me that quite often it doesn't work because it takes such a long time to put that infrastructure in. And by the time you put the infrastructure in, then something's happened, or there's a drought, or someone's died or something, and it's and you don't get you never get to that point where you can then manage the animals in the landscape to really make a difference. So I thought, bugger it, I'll just destock. That'll get whatever the landscape can do, it will be able to do by itself. And I'll worry about trying to survive in the meantime. So that's a lot longer on that slide that I was going to spend. But anyway, so this is how I sold it to my dad. He's an accountant, so to keep things simple. So this is what we should have. This is what we had, 200 years ago. Not that I'm saying that we should get back to 200 years ago, but anyway, this is what we should have in the landscape. We should have equal numbers of very palatable species to very unpalatable species. Oh, I thought you were trying to get my attention there for a second. So yeah, this is what we should have. This is what diversity looks like in my mind. But this is what we've actually got. This is me plugging around with this on what's this called, PowerPoint. So this is about as complicated. I was really excited that I got this far. But anyway, sorry that this is not a little bit more technical. So this pink bit, the blue is what we should have. The pink is what we do have. We've got rid of all of their species, and Hugh Pringle's not here, so I'll just steal some of his some of his words. So these are the ice cream species. We've got rid of all the ice cream species, and we're kind of down to the Brussels sprout species. Well, first of all, the stock got rid of the ice cream species. Then they got rid of the chocolate species, and then after 130 years, we're down to the Brussels sprout species. And they can eat the Brussels sprouts, that's fine, and the Brussels sprouts keep them alive, but it's not what makes them fat, and it's not what holds the landscape together. So this is how I sold it to the old man. I said, we need to get more of these up here. We're dealing with, a fraction of its former self, a landscape that it's a fraction of the former self. So this is what we want. We want to get more of these in. And down here we've got our increases. I'm glad somebody talked about that before, so I won't have to explain that. We've got more increases than we used to have. Anyway, I won't spend any more time. So that's what this is. This is all unpalatable species. Nothing there for a cow to eat. Salty soil, pretty ugly. This is a cattle pad here. The water's 3.5 kilometres away from there, so that kind of tells you that there's not much feed for the next 3.5 kilometres, because cows are lazy. They won't walk any further than they have to. The fact they're walking all the way out here, admittedly they're not using it at the moment, but that sort of tells you that, for some times, some seasons, they're walking an awful long way to get from the food to the water. So yeah, this is what we started with, 2004. So after the first season of destocking, which may not be the first year, because you might not get a growing season in that first year, but anyway, after the first season of destocking, this is what we've got. We've got a very few, there's been a few seeds in the soil of the good plants that we want, and they've germinated. How am I doing for time? Keep going. So we've had seeds in the soil. We haven't had actually any of the plants that we really want, which are palatable perennial grasses. We didn't know that at this stage, but anyway. We've just had those few seeds that are in the soil germinate. So there's only a very thin line of the ones that we want. The shrubs have increased here, and that's kind of what we originally destocked for shrubs, because we didn't actually realise that grasses grew. Oh, I'll leave that for a bit later. So the second season of destocking, which is probably not going to be the next year, so we might be talking about 4 years by now, 3 or 4 years. These double. The perennial grasses, the good species, there's just been seeds, and then all of a sudden there's a plant, it throws out a heap of seeds, and some of those take, and all of a sudden it's doubled, we've doubled the amount of grass in the landscape. We've doubled it, but it's still bugger all. It's still not, it's not really worthwhile at this stage. It's still, we haven't got anywhere near the returns on the destocking to make it worthwhile. The shrubs are increasing though, so that's good. These ones up here, they're gone. There are no seeds for those. We don't even know what they were. They're probably the ones that the early explorers explained as being up to the belly of their horses. We don't know what that plant was. Probably, maybe it's gone. Maybe it still lives up here in the Pilbara. I don't know, but they're gone. So that's what this looks like. This is the same site as before. This is 2009, so sort of 5 years on. I've taken these photos. It's not necessarily at the same time, but they're sort of within 3 months. But they're all showing only perennial species, so there are no annuals in this picture, and that's essentially, perennials are what we want. We don't really care about the annuals. They're nice, and some wildflower people come and look at them, and that's good. But they're not what's producing the feed for the cattle when we need it. We need food for the cattle in the summertime. And if it's not a perennial, it's not going to be growing, if it's not a perennial, then it's not going to be growing in the summertime. So it's all about perennials, not really that worried about the annuals. So it's looking a bit better. The ones that we didn't really like, they've died a bit, and they've been replaced by these lighter colour ones. They're saltbush. We used to get excited about saltbush. We used to think that they're fantastic. We don't get quite so excited about them now, but nonetheless, we were pretty happy with this because we'd started to get some of those, some of those better species into the landscape. So this is the third season destocking. All of a sudden, this has doubled again. So it's exponential, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make. You've got a little bit, then you've got twice as much, and you've got twice as much again. All of a sudden, you can see these in the landscape. They're popping up all over the place, and you think, oh, maybe this might work. And at this stage, we realise that should be grass all through our landscape, or maybe not all through, but in significant parts of it. So at this point, we've kind of forgotten about. I'll go back. At this point, we've forgotten about the shrubs. This is supposed to be filled in pink here, incidentally. I couldn't figure it out. It took me hours. I tried to figure out how to do that. I couldn't figure it out. So just assume this blue bit in here is actually pink. We've forgotten about the shrubs now. And by shrubs, I mean these ones here. These used to be the plants that we aspired to, but we don't anymore because all of a sudden we've got that green bit at the top. Which we realise, the perennial grasses, much better plants. So, not sure what the next slide is. So this is actually taken in the drought. This was about this time last year, August last year. But we can see these little perennial grasses coming up here. That's not a perennial, incidentally. Don't forget about that. So these little perennial grasses here, the ones that we want. That one looks dead, but anyway. And they're coming up all over the place. So we're pretty happy with that. So now, this is what we've got. All of a sudden, we're thinking, this is what we should be running our cattle on. Maybe a little bit of this, but all this other stuff here is not really what our production system should be running on at all. We should be grazing our cows on this bit, because that's what they like to eat anyway. Shrubs increased out here as well, but we don't really care about shrubs anymore. No, we love shrubs, but some of them. But the rest of them, we think, well, from a production perspective, we like shrubs, but they're from a production perspective, they're no longer what we aspire to. So all of a sudden, the grass is here, coming up all over the place, providing lots of food. These patches out here, and that's the problem with putting in monitoring sites. It's always better just a little bit further over. And you think, oh, why didn't I put it there? But anyway, these little bits up here, these light coloured bits, that's this grass coming up all over the place. You don't have to believe me. I've got another slide that'll show you that. So that's the progression. We started off with this. And this is just to show you that it is actually the same place. So we're happy with it. Here's another one. So I knew there'd be pastoralists here, and I thought, what would pastoralists want to see in a PowerPoint? I thought, before and afters, as many before and afters as I can. So this is one of the good plants. There was one good saltbush in the landscape. Apart from that, the rest of it's pretty rubbish. Should have put this closer. And this is 2009. We've got one good grass there on the side. More saltbush coming up here. So we sort of changed the pasture quite a lot. No idea where I'm up to. This is the drought. So still providing a lot of food in the drought. These ones here, all still eminently edible for a cow. So and we did have cows just after that photo in there, and we were what were we doing? Our cattle were still fattening at the end of a 2-year drought. So we're pretty happy with that. I mean, they probably weren't necessarily here. There are other parts of the paddock which were better. I should put that in context. In 8 years, we've had 8 months stocking in this paddock. 4 of those months were in the winter time, so they were eating the annual plants. They weren't eating these plants, so they weren't. That 4 months of the 8 months wasn't really stocking at all because they weren't eating the perennial plants, and that's essentially what we try and do. I don't believe the landscape, I think it's got a long way to go in terms of recovery. So when we buy, well, the reason we buy cattle is because tourism's not making enough money. So we buy some cattle and to make up the shortfall, essentially, and we try and run them in the winter time. So we want to buy them, March and sell them in November or something. Because if we can keep them off in that summertime, we might as well be destocked for the whole year, because it's those critical summer months when all the damage occurs. Getting a bit off track, but anyway. So yeah, we'd had 8 years destocking and 8 months stocking, but 4 of those months were in the middle of the drought, and they were still putting on condition at the end of a 2-year drought. And then that's what it looks like now. So that's after the cattle have been in there. That was a week ago, actually. So pretty sure we've had that one before. So yeah, that's what we started with. We started with that, and now we've gone to this. So the cows they really only want to eat this. They're only eating that bit. They eat a bit of that as well, but cows don't bother about any of the other stuff that they used to eat anymore. There's heaps more shrubs, remember? It's all pink out of there. And there's a lot more of the shrubs. That's why they don't have to eat this stuff anymore, because there's that much of stuff that they like to eat. Jesus. But this is what they particularly want to eat. And it's only at this stage that the destocking actually becomes worthwhile. I think that's the whole point for this first 1/10 of my talk. No. Is that destocking for 1 year is a waste of time. Destocking for 2 years, still a waste of time. 3 years, probably still a waste of time. It's only once you get that exponential effect, and maybe next year, maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but maybe next season, not year, maybe the grass will be out here. So it's that exponential effect that you want. The first few years of destocking, waste of time. The later years of destocking is when it actually becomes worthwhile, in my opinion. Those two over there probably disagree with me, but anyway. So yeah, that's what we've gotten to there. Pretty happy with that. Are we? Yeah. Okay. We'll go through it. So kangaroos, they're a big problem. Had lots of those. Not so much of a problem now, because dingoes have eaten most of them, come into the country, eaten all the goats as well. We won't dwell on that. Here's another one, before and afters. We'll skip through these quickly. So we've gone from there to there. Pretty happy with that. How much time have I got, Tim? So that was the ones before. They were the flood country. This is the mulga country. So it's not quite so excited in the mulga country, because the mulga country is shedding its water. There's a lot of erosion in the mulga country. When the rain falls, it rushes off the mulga country and ends up in the flood country more often, which means, well, in my opinion, you're much better off working on your good country, because your good country, your flood country, can to some degree take advantage of the fact that mulga country is degraded. Because the water's the flood country is getting water more often now, as long as it's slow enough, as long as it's not accelerating erosion. Anyway, mulga country. So here's the progression of, we're sort of getting rid of this little eroded channel. That's the same time period. So it started off in 2004 and went through to last week. We're stopping the mulga country shedding its water over that time period. So pretty happy with that. Not just, oh no, haven't got enough time. And this is another one. Roughly the same. And we're starting to get some of the little good plants. All these little ones under here, you can't really see them, believe me, they're there. You can see that one at least, because I put a yellow circle around it. They're good perennial pasture species coming back in the landscape. That's what we want. So I don't have a monitoring picture, or before and after, of good bits of the mulga. But here's the bit that I just taken a photo of. We've got good grasses coming up in the middle of mulga country, which is not something I ever thought that I would see. This is a comment from one of the early explorers about Mr. Austin's Mount Welcome, which is on Walleen. The grass was found to be very luxuriant, from 2 to 3 feet high, and between there and Mount Murchison, and this spot is almost exactly in the middle of that line. It described by Mr. Trigg, who was the second in command, to be very beautiful and superior to any he had seen, and equal to the best in Victoria. So maybe that's a little bit optimistic, but anyway. Here's some kids building some Enviro rolls. The problem with the Enviro rolls, if you wanted to build one, is that they're now 3 times the price as what they used to be, because BlueScope shut down their operations in West Australia. That's a bit of a problem, but anyway. We built quite a few of them. So this is the Roderick River coming in there, and the Murchison River going around there. So these Enviro rolls going all the way through there, trying to bolster the pinch point, because there's rocks here, it all goes through this bit here. So perfect spot, I think, to try and slow down the whole system. We'll just skip that altogether. There's Francis. We've got... No, I won't. Ooh, that's the wrong one. So this is coming up in the middle of the Murchison River. So we've got sedges coming back in the Murchison River where they were never growing... Well, they would have been growing 200 years ago, but we're actually raising the level of the riverbed at that point. So pretty happy with that. And we're helping it along a little bit. We thought this might be something that the schoolgirls could do because enviro roles we can't afford anymore. You know, get them to grow little sedges in the river. Dog helping there. Forget about that one. But this is how we pay for it all. Tourism, lots of gardening involved. But yeah, that's essentially what we're doing to pay the bills in the meantime. We have had some cattle, not very many, but nonetheless, we've had 2 lots of cattle since we've been destocked. But anyway, campgrounds, open some campgrounds. What else have we got? That's me taking a tour. Me releasing swans, not really relevant, but anyway. Building sim. So in the destocking, because we don't have the stock, and admittedly we're spending a lot of time with tourists, but if you've actually got time, you don't have to look after the stock all the time, you've actually got time to put the infrastructure in. And you can do it very cheaply if you've got a lot of time. So, you know, these cattle yards cost me, I don't know, $3,000 or something. Bits and pieces I found lying around. More cows, chasing my dog. More infrastructure. So we want to try and start rotationally grazing. At the moment, we're trading rather than breeding. So we're rotating off property, essentially, because we don't have the infrastructure on the property or the landscape in the correct condition to be able to support it. So this is us putting in pipelines with my very agricultural looking thing to try and get enough water to where we want it so that we can water big mobs of cattle. Because that's, you know, it's not just fences, but you also need, if you've got a big mob of cattle in the one spot, you need to be able to water them. So we've been working away at the infrastructure for the last few years. That's the trough. We've been upgrading our motor cars. So lots of people, have I got time for this, David? You can cut me off here if you want.
No, I keep going, yeah, might as well.
Okay, we only got 2 more to go. So this is grass. Now, lots of people say, you know, with all the problems that we've got in the Southern Ranges, is it even a good place for pastoralism? And personally, I think it is, and I sell it to myself this way. You know, food security is going to be a big issue in the future. You know, perhaps it's a big issue now, but the longer we go, the more food security is going to become an issue. We've got twice as many people in the world now as we had in 1975. So that number is obviously always growing and growing quite rapidly. I think we're going to have to be a lot cleverer about how and where we produce our food. Now, you're not going to like this, but pastors won't. But you know, grain is a much better use of the world's resources as a food than meat is. It takes 11 times the amount of energy to produce a food calorie of meat than it does to produce a food calorie of grain. So that's not all bad news, I don't think, because, I mean, if we don't eat meat in the future, well, that's a different story. But if we do eat meat in the future, then... Oh, really? Okay. So I better finish that bit. So that means to me, you know, out here we can't grow a crop. So if we're going to have meat in the future, then these are the areas that we should be growing it. Because, and we should be leaving, you know, where we can grow grain, we should be using that area to grow grain. Because that is the best use of the world's resources. The more grain we can grow, the more people we can feed. But out here we can't grow grain. So if we're going to eat meat in the future, then this is the area that we should be producing it, places that we can't grow grain. And so destocking, is it economical? Not really. Is it necessary? Southern Rangelands, I think to some degree, yes. Is it a great business model? No, but it's better than praying for rain.